You may be seated.
Grab those Bibles. Go to Luke chapter 10. Luke chapter 10. We're going to be here in a moment. As always, thank you, Jimmy, for starting up this series last Sunday. I'll turn this on so I can move around. There we go. Yes. Luke 10 is where we're going to be. Luke 9 was where we started this journey last Sunday with Jesus setting his face upon Jerusalem. We're entering into this period of time in Luke where Jesus is like, I must go to the cross. Don't distract me from the cross. That's where I'm headed. I've got to get there. That's his purpose. That's his vision. That's what he's meant to be doing. And so in chapter 9, he tells the disciples and all of us, this is what I've got to go. I've got to get to the cross. And so hopefully you saw that with Jimmy's lesson last Sunday. This Sunday, we're going to go to chapter 10 now, and we're going to start looking at how he invites us to also participate in this journey. We're not headed to Jerusalem to the cross, so we have a different place we are headed to, but still it's a cross-bearing operation. And so chapter 10, if you look right at the first of the chapter, he starts by sending out his disciples to go do the thing about the kingdom of God is at hand. And so he's inviting his disciples to participate in the same journey of sharing the gospel. And so that goes on for about 24 verses, this sending out of the disciples and basically asking them to join in on the journey. And of course, do the disciples understand it at this point? No, they still think Jesus is probably going to try to defeat the Romans at some point, or at least that's what they're hoping that he's going to do. So they don't understand yet. And so they're going to be a distraction at some times. They're going to try to hinder his cause at some point because they don't understand. And of course, the world and Satan, obviously, Satan has no clue about what's going on here. And so we get to chapter 10, verse 25. And we're going to have this story called the Good Samaritan. And I think just about all of us in this room probably know this story really well. And so we'll have a chance to really fly through it and get to our main points of what he's trying to do with us here in just a moment. Just a reminder for some other places though. Oh, and I have to say yesterday was a great day when it comes to the building construction because there were actually people working there on a Saturday. And they were putting up stucco. And it was really fascinating to see and to watch, of course, these guys climbing up this giant scaffold all the way up to the top of the building. And I kept thinking, wow, okay, yeah, I guess that thing won't fall. And it never did. But wow, it looks so... and then they had a pulley and they'd be, pulling up Portland cement, to do the first base coat of the stucco. I don't envy those guys and what they're doing. In that work. But anyway, that was what was going on at the building yesterday. Shill and I, if you haven't been, if you weren't in Bible class, we just got back from a week in Korea visiting the grandchildren. And so Jimmy spoke last Sunday, and then I'll be around here for quite a while, of course, as we continue to go through this building construction and as we look at Luke. And so that's where we're headed. We are just on this journey. And so just some reminders now of some of these verses. His Jerusalem becomes our message of hope and salvation. That's what Jesus is trying to do. He's trying to help us see that the journey didn't stop at the cross, that it continues, that we today, as the Lord's body, we have this journey to fulfill, that we're on a mission, that we must set our face to Jerusalem and fulfill our purpose as a church. And so that resolution, that ability to stay focused no matter what, that's what Jesus had, and that's what he invites us to participate in. And so just some other places, just a reminder here that this is not a foreign concept, of course, to the entire New Testament. This is where the New Testament writers all go to. They, of course, want to show us that we too need to resolutely set our faces to the cause. Ephesians 4, you were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, to be made new in the attitude of your minds, and to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. We're to be like Jesus Christ. And what did Jesus do? Jesus set his face to Jerusalem. And he did not allow anything else to get in the way. Matter of fact, at one point, when Peter gets in the way, what does he say? He's like, you're like Satan. Like, step aside. I am going to the cross. That's where I've got to go. And so this joining in with him. And if you look in your little handout there, I've got Philippians 2, of course, another great passage. And then finally, 1 Peter 4. Peter here does a great job of just telling us, just point blank, here's the journey you're on. Therefore, since Christ suffered in his body, arm yourselves also with the same attitude. Because he who has suffered in his body is done with sin. As a result, he does not live the rest of his earthly life for evil human desires, but rather for the will of God. And so there's Peter's understanding, of course, as he went through what he had to go through, to understand, wait a minute, I'm on the journey also. I've joined up with Jesus. And now just like he has this journey he's got to go on, we too must fulfill our destiny, our vision, our purpose, our reason as Longmont Church of Christ. And so this is done collectively and it's done individually. And so just like he sent out individuals, he sent them out collectively to go do a task. And so that bringing that hope of salvation to the world that we are all involved in. Okay, so with that in mind, he is going to now take us on a little journey for the next 2 chapters on, okay, here's some of the pitfalls. Here's some of the blessings. Here's some of the hindrances. Here's some of the distractions. Here's some of the things that if you're not careful will take your eyes away from the cross, from the journey that's ahead. And so what is it in our own lives that if we're not careful can cause us to not focus on what is the place to be, the zone where we need to be. And so the Good Samaritan story starts out with that. And so notice the text now, because, well, it's just, let me open my Bible here. And so notice the text, how he does this, how he frames it for us. Chapter 10, verse 25. Behold, a certain lawyer stood up and put him to the test, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And he said to him, What is written in the law? How does it read to you? And he answered and said, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live. But wishing to justify himself, he said to Jesus, And who is my neighbor? Notice this story. It's Luke has just told us back in chapter 9. Verse 51, it came about as the days were approaching that he resolutely set his face to go to on this journey to Jerusalem. And then what's the very next story? You know, Luke did this on purpose. It's like Jesus has all kinds of stories. He's doing all kinds of things. He's healing people and doing all kinds of things. But it just so happens that Luke wants to frame that statement of Luke 9:51 with this story. And how do I know that's there? Because Jesus says, verse 30, there was a certain man who was going on a journey. And you think back to the journey of chapter 9. Except it's no longer Jesus. It's just some man. And there's some other people going on journeys. And so notice how in between he's invited us to participate in the journey. And so now he's just saying to us, okay, on this journey, I want you to know that there's going to be those who will listen and those who do not. But the fields are wide unto harvest. That's the in-between statement, right? As we have said frequently over the last few months, there is not a shortage of people who want to become Christian. It's a shortage of people who will harvest them. That's true in Longmont. It's true in India. It's true all over the world. There is no place where there's not the harvest. It's just, are there any workers to harvest them? And so, after saying that statement, pray for harvesters, he then says, well, let me tell you what this journey is like that I've invited you upon. Yeah, he's answering a lawyer about some question, but really that's not what the discussion is all about. I mean, the lawyer is asking an impossible question. Can you earn your way to salvation? No. So no matter how hard you try, you're not going to be the Good Samaritan. You will never make it. You are never going to help enough people to earn your way to salvation. So that's a done deal. It's like, that's the point Jesus makes to the lawyer. It's like, really? No, you really can't do it. You're going to have to trust in my mercy and my grace because you're never going to earn salvation. That's not the point. The point is, now let me tell you about this journey. And so here we go. That's where we need to be. He tells a story about the journey. Most will walk away from Jerusalem, but some will journey to Jerusalem. And so he's inviting you and I to journey to Jerusalem with him, to the cross. And he makes it, he starts with a very overt example of this. There was a man on a journey. And unfortunately, we all know this story well, don't we? It's like, unfortunately, he got robbed. He fell among robbers, verse 30. They stripped him, they beat him, they went off leaving him half dead. And by chance, a certain priest, he was going down on that road. That's code for he's going away from Jerusalem. He's not headed to Jerusalem. He's going down because you're always going up to Jerusalem because Jerusalem, of course, is the center of the universe in the Jewish world. Anyway, a certain priest was going down on that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise, a Levite also, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan who was on a journey, see, the Samaritan's on the journey. He's on the right journey. He came upon him, and when he saw him, he felt compassion and came to him and bandaged up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. And he put him on his own beast and brought him to an inn and took good care of him. And on the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper and said, take care of him, and whatever more you spend when I return, I will repay you. Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell into the robber's hands? And of course he said, the one who showed mercy. And Jesus said, go and do the same. It's almost like the lawyer, Jesus could have said to the lawyer, which of these 3 men do you think joined me on my journey? And the lawyer answered correctly, the third one. And Jesus said, you're right. He's the one showing mercy. You go and do the same. We're on the same journey as Jesus is on. And so that journey has some pitfalls. And so that's our lesson this morning. And so here's our warning. The easiest route is to do nothing. Right? That's the easiest route in that story. It's like the easiest thing to do in our journey is just to do nothing. It's just to pass by. It's just like, I'm just going to pass by. You know, all the speculation, all the different reasons why. You guys can create those in your mind, right? It's like so many things. It's so easy. I mean, it is easy to do nothing, right? To show a lack of compassion. And so there's that warning. Don't be like the priests. Don't be like the Levites. They're the ones that did absolutely nothing for whatever reason. And so maybe they were too busy to get involved. I call this the big distraction in life. It's like we are so busy. We have so much in our schedules. We are doing so much that are we too busy to get involved? And so I think that's another part of this warning. It's like, okay, remember, there are lots of distractions out there when you go on this journey. There's going to be all kinds of distractions. What else could we say? Well, I think being blind to the plight of our neighbors, right? I think that caused a failure to act. I mean, these guys were just blind. The Samaritan, of course, is on a different journey. So he saw the fellow that's been robbed and beaten and half dead. And so, are we blind? Have you ever said to yourself these words? I am ready to help people. I just don't know anybody who needs help. Trust me, you're blind to anybody who needs help right now, because there's a whole room full of people who need help right here. There's a whole world of people that need help. And so, but am I blind to it? Have I gotten so wrapped up, so busy, so whatever the word is, that I can't even see this fellow that's there half dead? And so I get it. I get what Jesus is trying to say. And so about the Levite and the priest and how we don't want to be like that. And so maybe just some, if you got some points to make, here they are. Just, I think, some observations for us. We must become like the Good Samaritan, right? We must journey to Jerusalem also. And so that's what Jesus is inviting us to do with this story. He's like, I'm inviting you to be like this fellow. I'm on my way to Jerusalem, and so was this guy. Now, what was this guy? So I think here's some points for us. I think number one, we must not be apathetic to the world's problem of sin. It's like so easy. I don't know about you, but this is so easy for me, and maybe this lesson's only for me, and so just bear with me, but because I look at this lesson and go, this is so true. I go through these moments where I'm like, they've all made their choice. Okay, they don't get it. The church is awesome. I mean, it is the best thing. It is the best thing. Can you imagine? It's like, have you ever gone into a town and maybe you weren't a Christian and you pop into a new city? Can you imagine showing up in Houston, Texas, and you don't have the church? Where are you going to meet people? At the bar? I mean, at work? You're going to talk about work stuff all the time. I mean, it's just, where else would you go? It's like our blessing of the church is so powerful. And so I start going, well, if they don't want to be in the church, that's their tough luck. That's their tough cookies. Too bad for them. And I start becoming so apathetic because it's like, well, they made their choice. And it's like, wow, would I be the guy that's passing on the side? Well, he shouldn't have let the robbers do this to him. Too bad. I've got things to do, people to see, places to go. And so, do I fall into that trap? And so I hear Jesus saying, it is so easy to just, to just move on. I don't have the oomph to do it. All right, now a brief little side point, because we're going to move into the next point here. And so just a little side point, because I love this word. It's in the text, and you're going to see it off and on throughout the next parts of Luke. But it's right here in this particular text. And so it's a crazy little word. And so this word, spatnitsomai, it's an awesome word. Your text may have said pity, or verse 33, like mine, but a certain Samaritan who was on a journey came upon him, and when he saw him, he felt compassion. That word is an awesome word. It literally means to feel compassion deep down in your gut. It's a gut word. It's a really strange word. It's used in the New Testament by Jesus, pretty much by him alone, to describe certain things, or to talk about him, or the text talks about him as having it. And so it's a very much a Jesus word. It's a very, what's the best way to say this? It's a very rough word. It's like, it's not elegant. Like you hear in this word things like spleen or intestines or in the innards is really the best way to say it. It'd be like your innards. And so this word is to feel this compassion and act upon it because it's down in your gut. It's like the fellow was walking along and he went, this guy's in trouble. I must do something. And here's the other reason I love this word. Jesus uses it multiple times. We'll see it all throughout. Great example coming up down the road, Luke 15, right? The father felt compassion for his prodigal son, right? It was down in his gut. But let me tell you why that's so important. Why it's such a intestines kind of word. Why that's important? Because wrapped up in this little Greek word, well, actually it's a pretty big Greek word. Wrapped up in this big Greek word, the foundational concept is this. It's when I approach the altar and make a sacrifice, I offer the entire animal, including the inward parts. You got to connect the dots. You got to connect the dots on this. And I want to help you connect them. Listen to what he's saying. He's saying, this compassion, this feeling I have to help this person, it will cost me. That's what sacrifices do. It's a sacrifice can't be called a sacrifice unless it's what? Sacrificial, unless it costs you. And so Jesus made the point of saying he's going to cough up money. It's going to cost him physically. It's going to cost him mentally, emotionally. It's like every way you can think of. It's like it must cost him in order to help this fellow. Or it wouldn't be this word. it's like, that's the kind of compassion Jesus feels. It's just like talking about a sacrifice of an animal where you burn up the inward parts and it costs you. It's like the entire animal gets burned up. That's down in the foundation of this word. And so I love that concept, because now going back to the text, what can I say about this? How does that come out now? It's like he's saying to us, be compassionate. The journey requires sacrifice. Or it's not a journey. It's like Jesus, do we connect the dots now? It's like Jesus set his face to what? What is he setting his face to? The cross. He's going to die on the cross. It's not going to be a pleasant experience. And so Jesus has to set his face to it. He's like, this is why I'm here on this earth. I am on this earth to go to the cross. So don't distract me. And he says, I want to invite you on the same journey. And that journey requires you to be compassionate. And that means sacrifice. Will it cost me to be the Good Samaritan? Yeah, we know it does. I can't be apathetic anymore. I can't just say I'm too busy. I can't just it costs something, doesn't it? It's like it takes money and effort and time and will and emotions and whatever other words you can think of to take care of somebody, doesn't it? I mean, he had to go back and check on this guy. He had to pay for whatever. He had to put him on his own donkey. I mean, on and on the story goes, right? And so even the donkey had to pay on this puppy, right? And so number 3, we have to do the right thing even when it's unpopular. All right. I see that in the text. Now, so what? Okay. So this is the journey, and Jesus is inviting us on this journey. And if you want, the reason I brought up that Greek word is because I think that's the uniqueness of this text. It's a very unique word. It's not used very often. And Jesus is saying, here is what you must have to join me on this journey. You've got to have this deep compassion. It's a Jesus-type character. Right? It's just a Jesus-type word. And so here's our task then, right? Here's what we're to do. We've got to do the right thing, even when it's completely unpopular. All right, now how do I do this? How do I do this? How do I go on this? And so in your notes, there's a little black box. And in that black box, this is the part I think is important. Now it's the application. It's like, okay, where do we go with this? Okay, so we have a Good Samaritan, and the lawyer's long gone. Don't even think about him. Think about the journey. How do I go to Jerusalem? How am I headed to Jerusalem and not headed towards wherever else in the world? How do I be like Jesus in this? I think it's hard, right? Remember, we're not earning our salvation. We're saved by the grace of God. But now he's inviting us to join him as his saved people. And so in order for Longmont Church of Christ to make a difference, we must be like the Good Samaritan. We've got to be a compassionate people. We must set our face on this journey, because Satan would love to convince us that we are God's people and we don't need to do a thing to this world. He would love for us to just camp out, to just coast, to just be like, okay, we're God's people. We're good. Everything's great. Too bad those people don't understand. Oh, it's too bad. They're all driving around right now, getting ready to go to lunch maybe. And boy, they're missing out on what a great family it is. No, we can't be like that. We've got to set our face to Jerusalem. So how do we do this? How do you and I? Well, here's what you and I need to do, I think, for this lesson. And we're going to build on this, of course. But this is what I think Jesus is trying to tell us. I think he's trying to say, give our lives some slack. Like, what does your schedule look like? Have you built in time to care for others? Have you built in time to see, oh look, there's a guy. He's just been robbed crazily and he's half dead. This morning, somewhere in here, right now, to your left or right, I don't know how far away, somebody's just been robbed. Now, they weren't beaten and left on the road to Jerusalem, but somewhere in life, bad things happened last week. And so, do you have time in your schedule for them? What's your schedule look like? Because, that's the point of the Levite and the priest. They passed on they got places to go. They got important things to do. And so I don't have time for that. And so look at your own life. How's your life looking? Have you left any time whatsoever? We schedule so many things, don't we? It's like we put all these different things in. It's like, do we put in time for being the Good Samaritan? Number 2, you and I need to accept that God has assigned each of us people to care for. I think that's a part of this journey. It's like, was the cross what Jesus was headed to? Yeah. Was it assigned to him? Yeah. Was this what he needed to do? Yeah, it was his purpose. It's like, he's going to have to work hard to get crucified. Because they don't just crucify anybody. I mean, it's a lot of money and effort to crucify somebody. And it's like, is Jesus even worth being crucified? And so he had to work hard to be crucified. And so what about us? God has given you and me people to care for. Some are in this group. Some are in the body. Some are outside the body. But you have a quota, I guarantee it. I promise you, God has given you up to your ability at this moment. And beyond that, here's so-and-so, and here's so-and-so, and here's so-and-so. You're actually been assigned them. You're God to them in the sense of Jesus Christ, caring for them, showing, and there's that Greek word again, showing compassion to them as the Lord's body, because that's what we are. We're the Lord's body. And so, who have you been assigned? And how well are you taking care of them? And have you given any time or energy to that? Because it's going to cost. It's going to require sacrifice. Just like that fellow had to pay off the hotel, right? Number 3, I think you and I need to be honest with God about not wanting to take the time to actively care for others. Because all of us have a cross problem. All of us are being torn away from Jerusalem. It's like over and over. It's like, but I've got all this to do, and these things are, but I've got and there's this, and it's like, nope. And on top of that, there's what the world does to us about how a church should be. It's like, we can't let Satan define for us what the church is like. We've got to let Jesus do it. And Jesus said, the Good Samaritan is your example. Well, ultimately, he says, of course, he's our example of setting his face resolutely to the cross. And all of us have that problem, don't we? It's like, I've got to be honest with God from time to time and go, okay, God, I am not always on that. It's a struggle. Finally, number 4, I think this is the prayer that we need to pray. Recognize the selfishness of our hearts and ask God to change us with the Spirit. We all have it. We all have distractions. We all get busy. We all have life. And so how do I think the Spirit has to get involved. I think that's a part of this lesson. You and I must pray. I don't want to be like the lawyer, right? But that's not really the discussion. The discussion is, do I want to be going to Jerusalem or away from Jerusalem? What journey are you on? And you're probably thinking, this was Mother's Day. Where's the mother's lesson in this? And it's like, well, that was it. I've been waiting to share with you one story for quite a while. I think it's the story it's the story of a mother, but I think it's the story of the church. It's the story of why I think we do what we do. It's why we have a children's home. It's why we have Hope Light Medical Clinic. It's why we are on a journey to do what we do, and that is to form relationships, to care for people, to sacrifice so that they can hear the gospel. And that's our journey. That's the mission that we have been invited to participate in. And I'll leave you with this great story. I'll use it from time to time, and so you'll hear it again because her name was Catherine. You've probably never heard of her. Catherine Laws was her name. She was married to Lewis Laws. She died in 1937. Her husband was the warden of Sing Sing prison, and she had 3 small children. Matter of fact, when he became the warden, and he became the warden. It was a very rough time. Obviously this is in the 20s, and prison's a pretty rough place anyway.
And so this woman, along with her husband, they of course went, and he became the warden. One of the first things she did was she took her 3 small kids to the prisoner basketball game. And so in the midst of all the other prisoners, she just started watching them play basketball games. And then she just slowly started forming relationships with prisoners. That's all she did. She just started forming relationships with prisoners. And so over time, from 1921 to 1937, she was involved in that. 1937, in October, she died in a car accident. And so we'll have the rest of that story in a moment. But she, of course, became known as the mother of the prison. But those weren't her children, of course. These are all prisoners. She discovered one time that a convicted murderer was blind. And she would pay him a visit, and she started talking to him, and she asked him, "Do you read Braille?" And of course, he had no idea what Braille was. And so she learned Braille and then taught him Braille. And you think, wow, that's a multi-year journey for some prisoner stuck in prison for the rest of his life, but that's what she did. There was actually a deaf person, and she learned sign language and then started teaching sign language in the prison. And just little things like that, where she, of course, was forming relationships. But here's the thing that was so important about her life. She died that night in October 1937. It quickly went across the prison, of course, that she had died. And so on the morning of the funeral, all the prisoners went to the main gate and demanded to see the warden and said, "We must go to this funeral for Mama that's been so wonderful to us." And the warden said, "Open the gates." They went to the funeral, 3/4 of a mile, they walked, every prisoner went back. You think, how often does that happen? How often would a prisoner do that? Would not escape and be free. But for that brief moment, relationship trumps everything else. Right? And so you think about what Jesus is trying to say to us. He's like, the journey requires us to sacrifice and to be the kind of person that's willing to pay attention to people who've been burned, to people who've been robbed, to people who've been, whatever the words are, right? And so, just like those prisoners saw fit to honor this woman and actually not escape, and actually all went back to prison just like they were supposed to. And who knows how many of them tried to escape later on, right? But in that moment, they weren't going to do it because of this woman and what she had done with them. And so, how about us as a church? Do people need to hear the gospel? You know it. How do we do that? We've got to set our face to Jerusalem, just like Jesus did. So he invites all of us to join in with him in that journey. It's a journey that I think all of us have been on, and those of us that are Christians, we know we had to go through it too, didn't we? We had to have somebody tell us about Jesus Christ. Somebody had to love me. Somebody had to teach my Bible class in 4th grade, and 5th grade, and 6th grade. I mean, somebody had to put up with us boys, right? And doing the thing, Shill and I still laugh about, it was actually Shill's dad that was teaching the class whenever 3 of us boys, he calls us out and you guys are being boys during the prayer and messing around. And of course, one of us had to say well, your eyes were open too if you were seeing us kind of thing. I mean, you think about all the punishment that we inflict on other people, and yet they stayed faithful to us. They kept sacrificing and doing the right thing and helping us on our journey. So we should be the same way, shouldn't we? So that we too can have lots and lots of people join with us on this journey to Jerusalem. Jesus, wow. Did he not have some distractions? Oh, the apostles. Oh, don't you love them? Doesn't it become clear as we hear their stories when they do these little silly things? Like, Jesus, do you not care that we're perishing? And Jesus is like, my goodness, how long do I have to put up with you guys?
to the end. I'm going to keep going. And he did. And we should too. Thanks, moms, for being there. And thanks for the church, right? Thanks for what Jesus has done for us and all of those that care so much. Are you taking the time and the care and the love and the relationship building that is necessary for us to be his people here in Longmont? Let's stand and sing.